am your Friday hostess, Natalie, and today, as you can see, we are in the backyard. It's a little windy, so if the sound's off, I apologize, but I just didn't want to sit in my house. It's really a nice afternoon. It's been kind of a rough week, and so here I am in my backyard Thursday evening. This week's topic, as I'm sure you all know by now, is shamanism or shamanistic practices. Now, I have not seen any of the videos this week, so I'm just going to go from scratch and tell you what I know, and hopefully you gain something from mine compared with everybody else's as well, or combined with everybody else's. Shamanism is defined as the practice of using a transcendental state or an altered state of consciousness to connect to the spirit world. So when you look at religious practices across the world, including those that follow the Abrahamic tradition, such as Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, you will see aspects of shamanism in almost every spirituality in the world. Now, where does the term shaman come from? There's a lot of debate about that. It's believed that the term shaman or shamanistic comes from the Eastern Asian religions, but you know, who knows? That's, I think, something that's actually lost to time. But that would be using anything to alter your state of consciousness in order to connect to spirit, whether it be malevolent or benevolent. Now, shamans are those who are skilled in this ability. So not every village, not every religion may have a shaman, but those who engage in shamanistic practices could be considered shamans. So how does that apply in the witchy sense? Well, I think when you look at religions such as the Pentecostals in the Christian religion, those people are reaching an altered state of consciousness by entering themselves into a frenzied state where they begin to speak in tongues and that sort of thing. So you see that in that type of practice. You don't see that as much in, I think, Catholic culture, so like Lutheranism, Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodox, although there are aspects of that. There are mystical types of practices that go within that, and when I was getting into, very deeply into the Catholic Church, I was tapping into the Kabbalistic and mystical sides of those faiths, which are kind of hushed and pushed under the rug. Now, in terms of, where was I going to go with this? I had this great train of thought, I really did, and it just sort of stepped out of the station there, guys, so I apologize, because I got this dog barking in the background. It's kind of distracting me. So, anywho, how does one achieve an altered state of consciousness? I think that's where I was going. And that can vary depending on practices. People do a lot of different things to reach this altered state of consciousness. So, for example, if you are doing any type of transcendental meditation, that would put you into an altered state of consciousness. When you are using agents such as incense, perfumes, flying ointments, any kind of drug, obviously, which I'm not condoning or purporting, but when you use those kinds of things and you are altering your state of consciousness in that way, maybe alcohol even, maybe a way that someone alters their state of consciousness. Now, you don't necessarily need those things to enter into a shamanistic practice of an altered state of consciousness. A lot of times you can simply achieve that by deep meditation and lots of practice. So, for example, best example I can give, my great-grandmother was a full-blood Cherokee. When I was very, very, very little, I remember her teaching me how to scry in the fire, because we had a family reunion, there was a bonfire, and she was telling me that if you look deep enough into the fire, you will hear the voices of your ancestors. And so I learned to do that by practicing it over and over and over, and it comes where a point where you're kind of letting your mind go, your eyes go unfocused, and you're just watching the flames dance, basically, and you start to see images and see things because you're tapping directly into that spiritual component of your family, in this case your ancestors. That is a shamanistic practice. Now, in terms of witchy practices, I think that a lot of people do not enter into shamanistic practices until probably their second year of study, or once they've actually practiced for a time and they've learned how to block out things and tap into that spiritual connection that we have within the universe. That really opens the door for shamanism. So in terms of, I think that the term shamanism is very intimidating to a lot of people, and I think a lot of people think that they don't know a lot about shamanism because they see it as a totally separate spiritual practice, when in part it is not. It is an aspect of spiritual practice that relies on altering your state of consciousness and entering into a transcendental state in some way in order to connect with the spirit realm or the universe as a whole. So anytime you do any type of Om meditation, anytime you use a drum beat, that would also be something. So if you guys remember last season, I think we did a music in the craft, or how people use music in the craft. That actually encompasses a form of shamanism. And if the camera is moving a lot, I'm sorry, it's kind of windy, and I just put my feet up and I noticed that the camera's kind of doing. So drum beats, especially the binaural drum beats, in that video I talked about the scientific evidence behind it actually altering your brain waves. That would put you into an altered state of consciousness. So if you use a steady drum beat or some sort of a drum or music, that can put you into a transcendental state. So that would be another method. So in order to organize my thoughts better, let me get back to that. So transcendental meditation, use of materials outside of yourself, such as incense, oils, flying ointments, anything that will place you into an altered state of consciousness, looking into deep within and tapping into that spiritual column of energy, that will bring you into a state of shamanistic practice. Now again, that's where I was going with that thought. I was stating that I thought a lot of people felt like they didn't know a lot about shamanism or didn't really understand it. They didn't really want to talk about it. But I will tell you that, and I lost it again. Oh man, this video is going to be so freaking disjointed. I am sorry, folks. And I think that that's due to kind of a misconception about the practice of shamanism. Got my thought back. Train's back in the station, folks. Woo woo. Okay. There is a misconception in the Western world that shamanism applies strictly to indigenous spiritual practices. We think about shamanism in terms of like some of the traditional African religions, some of the traditional Native American traditions, and some of those far Eastern practices that you would see like in the, you know, Himalayas or someplace like that. And that's true. They do incorporate shamanism into their spiritual practices, but they are not exclusive owners to shamanistic practices. Now, if you are wanting to become more adept at tapping into shamanism as a way to deepen your spiritual experience within the craft itself, you certainly can do that, and they would be some good sources to look into. So find yourself a good teacher, someone who is skilled in that level that can take you on those transcendental meditations and guide you into a more deep shamanistic practice. Now, if you're like me and you don't have a whole lot of access to people that are like that, then you can often find books and other materials. There may be YouTube videos similar to what we do here on the channel that are directly geared towards helping people achieve a level of shamanistic practice, whether you be witches or just magical persons. And I think that's the other thing, is that people associate it with just simply a separate type of spiritual mysticism. And it is a spiritual mysticism, but it's not necessarily separate from witchcraft or druidism or any of the other religions. It's not even separate from the Abrahamic religions, as I was stating. You've got Kabbalism, which incorporates shamanism. You've got a lot of your Pentecostals and deep Orthodox Christians that engage in practices of shamanism. If you ever watch Benny Hinn, then you know. Those all incorporate a type of shamanistic practice. Now, this is a book, and I'm sorry that I was not able to turn the camera around. My computer's been doing so much funky stuff, I decided not to try to risk it. At least the camera's working for the moment. I just wanted to get this video done. But this book is called Spiritual Healing in Native American Magic and Medicine. It's by Mary Dean Atwood. And if you are interested in shamanistic practices or incorporating aspects of Native American shamanistic practices in your craft, this is the book for you. This is a great book. I actually found this perchance at a half-price books, and I really like this book because it starts out with a very interesting foreword, and title. But the chapters, as you'll notice, you'll see some of these pages are decorated. This is actually where she's telling the story of one shaman or healer who is going through the process of becoming the village shaman, or actually passing his knowledge onto someone else. So all the pages that have decoration on it are a kind of a narrative, a story, and we've woven within that story are ways in which to tap into talking with the spirit and connecting through shamanistic practices. So she incorporates that within this book, and she talks about different types of divination. Many types of divination often incorporate shamanistic practices because you have to achieve a transcendental state. So crystal meditations, fire scrying, candle scrying, all of those things, folks, if you're doing those things, you're already engaging in shamanism. So just to sum up the video a little bit, shamanistic practices simply are practices geared towards spirituality in which you are tapping into the universal spiritual source, the universe, your ancestors, malevolent and benevolent spirits, through means of an altered state of consciousness. So transcendental meditations, use of outside materials such as incense or potpourri, smoke, music, I hate to say it, but illicit substances, if you engage in those. I do not, and I do not encourage you to engage in them, but flying ointments, which are not made with illicit substances, but with things that you can get, may also help you achieve this altered state of consciousness, and I do make and use flying ointments. I will shortly be selling those on my shop, the Purple Broom Apothecary, but I want to make sure that I get it perfected before I actually put it up for sale. I made a batch. I hadn't made some in quite some time, and I was trying out a new recipe and tweaking an old recipe, actually, not trying out a new recipe, but tweaking a recipe to kind of give it a little more of an oomph. But I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be anything dangerous before I sold it. But things like that can help you achieve that altered state of consciousness. As you get deeper and deeper into this type of spiritual practice, you become more adept at it. You find that you need those things less, and you can achieve that altered state much more quickly just by delving deeper into your own mind. And this book focuses very much on that, so that's why I recommend this book so very highly. But that is shamanism in a nutshell. If you're incorporating these things, I wouldn't necessarily go out and consider yourself a shaman because of the implications that are associated with that title, but you are definitely engaging in the practices of shamanism and could at some point achieve the level where you are tapped well into that source and can utilize it, such as Arwen Lynch does in her tarot readings. So I would consider her a shaman because she definitely taps into that universal. So anyhow, I hope that this video has given you guys some good information that you can utilize, and I hope that you gain some encouragement from it and get out there and start practicing these things, but stay away from those illicit substances, folks. You can do it with music and it works just as well. Find yourself a good drum beat and use that. So mote that shit, blessed be, and have a great weekend.